Right now, while you watch this, your debt is growing. Every minute you leave this unchecked, it gets worse. And the advice most people follow isn't actually fixing the problem, it's keeping them trapped inside it. What I'm about to show you is the reason millions of people spend years paying off debt and still end up with nothing to show for it. Stay with me, because once you see this, the way you think about debt changes completely. There's like 65 of us here right now. Basically, 65 future millionaires. So if you're not subscribed yet, I don't know if you belong in this room. Let's start with the number that puts everything in context. American households are currently sitting on $18.8 trillion in total debt as of Q4 2025, and credit card balances alone hit $1.28 trillion by the end of that year. The average person carrying a credit card balance owes $7,886 at somewhere between 22% and 25% APR. That works out to nearly $2,000 per year just in interest. And that's not an abstract figure. That's a flight to Europe. That's 3 months of groceries. That's money you worked for, handed directly to a bank that already has more than it needs. And nearly 1 in 4 Americans has zero emergency savings, which means they're paying 22% interest with absolutely no protection if something goes wrong. So when something does go wrong, and it always does, they borrow more, at 25%, at 28%. The trap doesn't just catch you, it compounds. Here's what most financial advice gets completely wrong. It tells you to pay more, pay faster, sacrifice harder. But nobody tells you the order. And the order is everything. You're not broke. You're misallocated. That one shift in framing changes every financial decision you make from this point forward. Because the problem was never your income or your willpower. It was the sequence. Here's where most people fall apart. They get motivated, they have $500 extra at the end of the month, and they throw it straight at their credit card. 3 weeks later, the car breaks down. $1,600 in repairs. No savings to cover it. So back to the credit card at 24% APR. They didn't make progress. They ran on a treadmill. Tired, stressed, and standing in exactly the same place. And this cycle repeats not because people lack discipline, but because they went on the offensive before building any defense at all. Before you put $1 extra toward any debt, you need a buffer. Not 6 months of living expenses. Just a starter wall between you and the kind of emergency that sends everything backward. Most financial planners land between $1,000 and $2,500 for this, sitting liquid in a high-yield savings account earning 4% to 5% right now. That buffer is the difference between a temporary setback and a full debt spiral. Build it first, then attack. Without it, every aggressive payment you make is one crisis away from being completely erased. Now here's where it gets expensive. Once the buffer is in place, most people still attack their debt in the wrong order. And that mistake alone can cost between $5,000 and $20,000 over the next 5 years. Not all debt is the same enemy, and treating it like it is can cost you thousands. Here's a real example. You have $10,000 on a credit card at 24% APR and $15,000 on a car loan at 4.9%. Most people look at that car loan, feel the weight of the bigger number, and start throwing extra money at it. That feels responsible. It feels like progress. But the math tells a completely different story. Your credit card is costing you roughly $2,400 per year in interest. Your car loan is costing you about $735. The credit card is bleeding you more than 3 times faster. And while you're focused on the car, that credit card balance is compounding quietly in the background every single month. You're not paying debt, you're feeding it. And this is where the thinking really shifts. The S&P 500 has averaged roughly 10% annual returns over any 20-year rolling period in history. Your car loan sits at 4.9%. Every extra dollar you throw at that loan beyond the minimum is earning you a 4.9% return in saved interest, while every dollar going into a broad index fund has historically returned around 10%. That gap is 5% per year, compounding for decades. On $500 extra per month over 20 years, that difference is roughly $143,000 in wealth. Not a rounding error, a different life. The enemy is 24% credit card debt, not a 4.9% car loan. Know the difference, because confusing them is quietly costing people fortunes. Now here's the mistake that might be the most expensive one on this entire list. If your employer offers a 401k match and you're not capturing it because you're throwing every dollar at debt, you are handing back free money every single month. If your employer matches 50% of contributions up to 6% of your salary and you earn $60,000 a year, that's $1,800 per year in guaranteed returns you're walking away from. A guaranteed 50% return before the market does a single thing. There is no credit card in America charging more than 50%. The highest rates in the country top out around 36%. So even your worst credit card loses to the employer match mathematically every time. For most people, the right move is to capture the full match first and then attack debt aggressively. The one exception is if you genuinely cannot make minimum payments, and in that case, you triage everything at once. But for anyone who is functional and just stressed about debt, leaving that match on the table is one of the most expensive decisions you can make quietly and consistently over years. This is the move that separates people who escape debt and build real wealth from people who escape debt and just end up exhausted. So here's the full framework, in the exact order the data supports. First, build the buffer. $1,000 to $2,500 in a high-yield savings account. Liquid, non-negotiable. This is your defensive line. And without it, everything else collapses the moment real life happens. Second, capture every dollar of your employer match. A guaranteed 50% return that nothing else on this list can touch. Third, attack high-interest consumer debt above 15% APR with everything you have. Credit cards, store cards, any buy now, pay later balance carrying interest. These are your real enemies, and they deserve your full focus. Fourth, once the credit cards are gone, redirect those payments toward medium-rate debt between 5% and 10%, while simultaneously increasing retirement contributions. Fifth, and last, low-rate debt like mortgages below 4% or student loans below 5%. These are your lowest priority, because at those rates, investing the difference is almost always the mathematically superior move. Following this order versus attacking debt randomly is often worth $50,000 to $150,000 in net worth difference over a decade. Same income, same starting debt, different order, completely different outcome. Now let's talk about the Snowball versus Avalanche debate, because people argue about this endlessly, and the real answer is more nuanced than either side admits. The Snowball method has you pay your smallest debt first, regardless of interest rate, build a win, roll that payment forward, and create momentum. The Avalanche has you attack the highest interest rate first and win on pure math. Research published in the Harvard Business Review found that people who focus on paying their smallest balance first stay more motivated and are more likely to actually follow through, not because the math is better, but because progress is what keeps humans going. We need momentum. We need to feel progress. Or we stop. And most people, if they're honest with themselves, have felt this. You grind on a $12,000 credit card for 8 months. The balance barely moves because interest is eating most of your payment, and the psychological weight becomes too heavy. Most people quietly give up. No announcement, no dramatic decision. They just stop. The Snowball keeps you in the game, and staying in the game is always worth more than perfect math. But the nuance is this. The difference in total interest between Snowball and Avalanche for most people is somewhere between $500 and $3,000 over the entire payoff period. Real money, but not life-altering money if the alternative is quitting. So what actually works for most people is a hybrid. Use the Snowball to eliminate your one or two smallest debts, build the engine, get the momentum running, then switch to the Avalanche and let math finish the job. Momentum and efficiency working together. This is what experienced advisors actually recommend to their real clients, away from the theory. The problem isn't your debt. It's your strategy. Let me make this concrete with a situation I've heard hundreds of variations of. A couple in their mid-30s, both working, decent combined income. They have $23,000 in credit card debt across 4 cards, a $19,000 car loan, and a mortgage. They get serious. They stop contributing to their 401k and throw everything at the smallest card. 4 months later, it's gone, and they feel incredible. Then the roof needs repair. $4,200. No emergency fund. Back on the credit card at 26% APR. The momentum collapses. They feel like failures. They drift back to minimum payments. And 5 years later, they have less money than when they started. That is not a discipline failure. That is a sequence failure. The same couple, with the buffer in place first and the employer match captured, clears that same debt in roughly the same time frame. But when the roof hits, they have the wall. The 401k keeps growing quietly in the background. 5 years later, they're debt-free and actually have something to show for it. Same income, same debt. The only difference was the order. Here's the psychological truth that ties all of this together. Debt payoff is not primarily a math problem. It's a psychology problem with math symptoms. You already know you should spend less than you earn. You already know 22% interest is bad. The information was never the obstacle. The obstacle is the weight of it, the overwhelm. The moment it feels impossible and you quietly tell yourself you'll start fresh next month. The buffer removes the fear of emergency. The Snowball removes the feeling of hopelessness. The employer match makes you feel like you're building something real, not just digging out of a hole. Know yourself well enough to choose the strategy you'll actually finish. because the best debt payoff plan is always the one you don't abandon. Here's what I need you to take from this. The financial system generates billions every year from people who never learned the order. People throwing extra money at low-interest debt while high-interest balances compound. People without a buffer who reset their progress every time something breaks. People leaving employer match on the table year after year. The machine runs on confusion. And now you see how it works. So here's the challenge before you close this. Open your phone right now and write down every debt you have. Just the balance and the interest rate. Not a full plan. Not a spreadsheet. Just the list. Because you cannot fight what you're refusing to look at directly. And most people spend years making payments while never once sitting down with the actual numbers. You did that today. That already puts you ahead of most people around you. Now you have one decision to make. You can go back to what you've been doing and wonder in 3 years why nothing changed. Or you can start the sequence. Buffer, match, right order, hybrid method. 5 years from now, one version of you is still trapped in the same cycle. Another version is debt-free, building real wealth, and becoming the person people around them come to for answers. The only difference between those two versions is what you decide to do right now.